Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1 has landed in theaters, and it's about the end of the run for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We've got those thoughts coming up in just a moment, along with some spoiler-free review, as I've seen the movie in theaters, and it is amazing. But let's talk about where this box office is going to wind up for some of these films, and especially for Mission Impossible 7. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. First up, of course, is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. After 11 days in the box office, it finally managed to cross $125 million domestically. That's the U.S. and Canada. And another $126 million at the international box office, bringing the total haul to this point after 11 days to $252 million. This is a sad, sad state of affairs for a film that reportedly cost somewhere north of $300 million. Possibly as high as $350 million has been my guess for quite some time now. That means that this movie is set to lose somewhere in the vicinity of around $250 million, $250 million loss for the Walt Disney Company on this one. $250 million is something this movie should have done in its opening weekend as a global haul if it had a chance. But again, it took 11 days to get here, and there's a lot of folks out there that don't see it getting much further. Matter of fact, some projections are now coming in for Indiana Jones 5 to finish under $200 million in the domestic market. And given the fact that the global and international market doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot better, we can get a sense at this point that that movie is going to probably wrap its run with a global haul of somewhere to the tune of $350 million, and it may struggle to get there. We're looking at $185 million or so by the end of the run for this film, and that may be on a high end, meaning that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is not even going to break, more than likely, the $200 million domestic mark, and that is bad news. But what isn't bad news is what's coming for Tom Cruise and Christopher Macquarie and the entire crew of Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1. We can see here from Box Office Pro, the weekend forecast is MI is looking at a $90 to $100+ million 5-day launch. Of course, that begins today as I'm recording this, Tuesday, July 11th, with previews. And we have some early estimates for those Tuesday previews coming in ahead of the first full day on Wednesday, July 12th, by the time you're watching this video. And what Box Office Pro is suggesting right now is a 3-day, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday opening weekend of $61 to $75 million with a 5-day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of $91 to $110 million. And this is one of those estimates that, as of right now, I feel like is going to err to the high side of this range, somewhere north of $100 million. We'll have to see just how north that gets. But one of the things with Mission Impossible films is that they don't tend to look or behave at the box office like, say, a Marvel or DC title does, a big superhero tentpole piece. Those tend to be far more front-loaded. For example, we've covered extensively Marvel box office runs where by the first 5 to 6 days, roughly half of the box office is already baked in. Mission Impossible is expected to leg out much better than the average Marvel film. So if this opens at $100 million over a 5-day period, there's a good chance this movie is going to conclude its run somewhere close to, or perhaps even north of $300 million. Now, Top Gun Maverick last summer did an amazing feat of pushing all the way up to $700 million. I don't know if anybody's expecting Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning to do that. But one of the things that Mission Impossible has going for it that a lot of other films don't, especially like Indiana Jones, is the international box office is where the biggest bank is going to be made. We'll show you in just a minute. Pre-sales for Dead Reckoning have not disappointed in the final stages of tracking before release, and the combination of Sunday's Walmart subscriber screenings, Monday's early access shows, and Tuesday's traditional previews have outpaced recent adult male-driven films like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and John Wick Chapter 4, as well as Creed 3. Now, one of the big things the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning has going for it, of course, are the scores on Rotten Tomatoes, and we can lament Rotten Tomatoes all we like, but I like to see how the critics and the audience line up on films like this, and just like Top Gun Maverick, there is absolutely no disagreement on the power of this film. If we look here, 98% on the critic score, certified fresh, 95% on the audience score with only a few verified ratings in at this point, about 100. I expect that score to maintain or even perchance go up a little bit. Like we've talked about in videos before with other movies, it's always a good idea to check to see how the top critics score compared to the all critics. And on this movie, there is absolutely no disagreement whatsoever. All critics stands at 98%. That's with over 200 reviews in, and the top critic score with 53 top critic scores also stands at 98%. That means the likelihood here that there's any kind of pixie dusting going on, or whatever you would call it for a Paramount or Tom Cruise picture, simply isn't happening. This is a movie that is genuinely adored by these critics across the board. And even with limited data on the audience side, we can see the verified audience and the all audience scores line up almost perfectly as well. Getting back to Box Office Pro, the cons of this film are not many. Not much is working against this sequel at this stage, except for the PLF competition, or the premium large format screens ahead, as Oppenheimer and to a lesser extent Barbie will take over much of that footprint, beginning with their respective preview openings next week on Thursday, July 20th. And we can see here the weekend projections of about $100 million total for the 5 days through Sunday, with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning 68.5 of that projected right now to come Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But if you look down here, what's very interesting is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Insidious, The Red Door, and The Sound of Freedom from Angel Studios are basically in a three-way dead heat coming into this weekend. Now, of course, these numbers are subject to change. These are purely estimates at this point based on ticket sales that have accumulated up to the time when they create these figures. That could alter. I think, if anything, The Sound of Freedom might actually pick up some steam again in this weekend. In other words, by the end of its third weekend, Indiana Jones could be looking easily at the fourth place position in theaters with only about $13 to $14 million in the bank. And this is why most folks out there that are tracking this are looking at, as I mentioned before, a final tally in the domestic box office of somewhere south of $200 million for this film. And that doesn't seem much of a surprise, with the Monday box office reporting Sound of Freedom at $4 million, Insidious, The Red Door at $3.5 million, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny at $3.2 million. Yeah, it's fallen all the way back down to the third place position. I don't see Indiana Jones climbing out of this hole again. To get an idea of what the potential breakdown for Dead Reckoning Part 1 is going to look like, let's look to the last movie, which was Mission Impossible Fallout from 5 years ago in 2018. A $220 million domestic box office haul and a $566 million international haul. And those top territories, of course, no surprise, China way out in front with $180 million for that film. I would expect Dead Reckoning Part 1 to look relatively similar to what we saw in 2018, or at least, of course, that is what Paramount is hoping for. South Korea came in at $49 million and Japan came in at $42. Now, of note, the opening for Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning will not hit Japan for another roughly 9 or 10 days at this point. I believe their opening is slated for July 21st. So this opening weekend projection that we're about to show you for Mission Impossible would not include one of its largest international markets. And here's the current breakdown. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 lighting up $6 to $7 million in Tuesday previews. Now, this just released moments ago as I began recording this video from Deadline Magazine and Anthony D'Alessandro. Dead Reckoning Part 1 is looking at $6 to $7 million in previews so far, which is bound to be higher than the Thursday previews of the last Mission Impossible Fallout back in 2018, which did $6 million. This is according to sources, and the figures we're seeing now could go higher or lower. So with the previews we're seeing, and when you include that with the 5-day opening figure, I think this movie will leg out to somewhere close to $300 million domestically. And if we look at previous Mission Impossible films like Fallout, we can multiply that by roughly 2 times and probably see a international market box office haul of about $600 million, hopefully a little bit more. This movie is going to get close to hitting $1 billion. It may go over, although I'm not expecting it to get near Top Gun Maverick levels that we saw last year. What we're really going to need to wait for with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the second weekend, because that's when some serious competition comes in. Not only from Oppenheimer, but also from Barbie. And as of right now, Oppenheimer is projected to take in about $50 million on its opening weekend, and Barbie to take in pushing $100 million on its opening weekend as of right now. Those numbers may go higher. The big thing, though, is that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is going to lose its IMAX-branded screens that weekend in favor of Oppenheimer. And the reason for that, well, Oppenheimer and director Chris Nolan shot the entire film on IMAX cameras, or almost the entire film on IMAX cameras. And of course, IMAX makes that a brand ambassador and decided to give it first run in its big screens, pushing Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible out. Now, what's going to be interesting to see is that Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible could pull off another $50 million in that same weekend that Oppenheimer potentially does, given how well his recent films have legged out. That weekend could actually be one of the biggest, if not potentially the biggest, weekends of 2023 for box offices out there. With just those 3 movies alone, that could bring in $200 million. Now, my prediction is that if Oppenheimer doesn't hang around well in the box office in terms of receipts, then it could be leaving IMAX after 1 or 2 weekends in favor of bringing something like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning back into those screens. Of course, they're going to ultimately make a business and financial decision, so time will tell. But as far as the movie itself is concerned, I cannot encourage people enough to go see it. Even with its runtime nearing 3 hours long, I had no compunctions walking in that I was going to be entertained from start to finish without a dead spot. And it certainly delivered. I had the same notion going in to see John Wick with also a near 3-hour runtime, and it didn't disappoint, not for a single second. And one of the biggest compliments I can give movies like this, big action pieces, is that you've got to keep audiences entertained, and both John Wick 4 and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning did just that. And a big kudos to the sound design team on both of those films. It's easy for big action tentpoles to become just a cacophony of noise, but every single sound effect had its place, and it was sharp, it was loud, and it was damn good. The experience was completely immersive, and I would suggest everybody go find this on an IMAX or PLF screen while they're still there. Once again, Tom Cruise knocked it out of the park, delivering real action and all the stunts being done in camera. And as much as I love the performances of Vanessa Kirby and Rebecca Ferguson, newcomer to the series, Haley Atwell, really stole the show. And I can tell you right now, I've already got tickets to go see it again. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you planning to see this? I hope that you are. I encourage everybody to do so. But if you're not, tell me you're not. That's fine too. What are your box office projections for Mission Impossible's opening weekend and complete run internationally and domestically? Curious to see what everybody thinks. I think this movie will be in contention for the $1 billion range, and this is going to be probably the second biggest movie of the year behind Super Mario Brothers. Then again, it could surprise and go even further. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, drop a comment before you head out the door today, and until next time, take care.